And we say, well, what is it that we can take away from this experience? And many people will dismiss the plant medicine experience as a hallucination. Well, it's just a hallucination. Well, what does this word mean? And so when we're talking about the word hallucination, we're talking about a word rooted in the Greek language that means to become filled with light. And so really when we say, oh, well, you can dismiss that because it's just a hallucination, we're saying, oh, you were just filled with light. You can ignore that. It seems to me that it doesn't matter what your religious background, we're all trying to be more filled with light. So anything that fills us with light is potentially a beneficial thing. Light and the process of differentiating light, one type of light from another light, all has to do with vibration. And what makes blue light different from red light, green light, etc., is the frequency at which it comes in and the way it's perceived. So some have discussed at great length this idea that there's a numerological code within color differentiation. For example, if you look at an oriental rug, the interplay of geometric shapes and color could be interpreted as information. Apart from the mundane interpretation of the geometry and the colors, there may actually be information encoded in that. And a lot of that information is something that is culturally ascribed or something that is pre-programmed, like a code. For example, with our languages, modern languages, we say that the letter A has an ah or an a or an ah sound to it. That's not an intrinsic aspect of it. That's an ascribed meaning. And in this idea of vibrational communication, thought forms can be perceived. You might be thinking something, you're in the kitchen and your wife would say, well, I know what you're thinking. And she actually does. When we talk about language, there's a very wide range of what constitutes language. Of course, the famous quote is that a picture is worth 1,000 words. It communicates information to us because of our cultural background and because of our own personal experience, what it brings up for us, and so on and so forth. There's a mathematical set of information encoded in it, if we want to ascribe a numerical meaning to the various colors. And then there's perhaps other information that is conveyed as well. The plant medicine experience is often described as hallucinogenic, meaning manifesting light within. With the hallucinogenic experience, we usually think of visions, we usually think of seeing pretty colors, geometric shapes. But many people have, in my own personal experience as well, have had experiences where it's not just pretty colors and shapes, it's actual memories from our subconscious coming up, or past events, or future events, or things that we'd like to see in our lives. It can also be manifest in the kinesthetic experience. Perhaps dance is a language. Any good choreographer would say every dance move has a name, and there's a vocabulary. Bees use dancing or a physical language to represent very sophisticated concepts which, us modern humans need a GPS and maybe a Rand McNally for. So clearly, dance can be a language. It is a language for some species. Images can be a language, because most artists would say, of course, clearly so much information is conveyed by a single image. And the juxtaposition of images, too, is extremely provocative. There are many instances of art pieces in the 20th century where two seemingly unrelated images are juxtaposed to create a very provocative reaction in the mind. So let's say you see 10 or 20 images in a row. That can create a very strong statement, whether it's broadcast over the television, or seen in an art gallery, or if it's something that we experience in our inner world during one of these plant medicine experiences. For me, my background is as an anthropologist, but also as a ethnomusicologist and a performing artist, performing musician. And my experiences with plant medicines have, although they have been visual, they have been kinesthetic, and they have also been on the level of intuition, getting a feeling or getting a sense that maybe I need to take some action in my life, change the way I'm doing something, etc. The predominant tone of my experience has been auditory, and I frequently will have the experience of hearing something differently from the way that someone else hears it, or, a step further, hearing things which other people do not hear. Of course, what I would add to that is that it's important to have the right kind of guidance. And when we're talking about indigenous communities, there is an elder, there is a master, a doctor or a shaman or any number of titles to describe this person, and they are the person who says, yes, you are ready to have this experience which will fill you with light. You have come of age, or you perhaps are in need of some sort of spiritual healing, and so on and so forth. These are not substances which people should experiment with in a haphazard fashion with no supervision. I think that's why plant medicines sometimes get a questionable reputation, because there's so much haphazard experimentation which can lead to, at best, disappointment. People say, well, I tried that, nothing happened. Or, at worst, it can cause an individual who's probably not a good candidate for the experience to become unstable, someone who has a pre-existing history of mental illness or other types of health problems. It might not be a good candidate for some of these experiences. I think, again, it's important to underscore the importance of responsible use of these substances, whether it's a clinical setting or a traditional shamanic setting, or at least someone who is an adult who is ready to take full responsibility for their experimentation. This is not the sort of thing that you'd want to leave lying around the house for kids to get into at a birthday party. So here we have a situation where it's clearly in our best interest as humans to eradicate an illness such as alcoholism, which is different from someone enjoying a drink on a Sunday afternoon at the golf course. We're talking about serious alcoholism here, something that really, devastates families and causes other unforeseen consequences. And if that person were to, let's say, ingest peyote in a peyote meeting with some Kiowa elders, as Richard Schultes did, then they, by looking deep into their subconscious and seeing, whoa, from another perspective, my life is a mess. Gee whiz, I think I better stop drinking, or at least stop drinking so much, maybe. Then there's a negative economic impact here. But we as the human species are reaching a point in our evolution where our own economic aspirations may well be our own suicide plan. And as intelligent beings, we have the prerogative for course correction, just as an alcoholic does. And so if an alcoholic were to ingest peyote and say, whoa, I need to stop drinking, stop crashing cars, stop beating my wife, perhaps an investment banker, having the same experience that Richard Schultes did with the Kiowa elders in their peyote tent, might come out of that saying, gee, since there are thousands of times more fatalities every week from hunger as there are due to religious fanaticism and violence associated with it, perhaps it might be ethical for one in a position of economic power to address that, to rectify that, and recognize that actually anyone who is hungry and desperate potentially becomes one's murderer. So instead, if we learn to cooperate and get along with each other, that by taking good care of others, we're taking good care of ourselves. And that's really what we're trying to do. Of course, we all want to take care of our own survival here. But many indigenous tribes worked with these plant medicines as sacraments to help foster a sense of unity within the tribe. Many people will have the plant medicine experience now in a modern context, whether it's their own experimentation, or whether it's in a clinical context, or a ceremonial context. They'll come away thinking that they have more of a sense of interconnectedness with their fellow beings or with other living creatures of the world. And this is a good thing, when you're talking about law and order. Many of these substances are considered to be at odds with law and order. But actually, if you were to propose, as Aldous Huxley did, a utopian society where some sort of a sacrament is consumed which brings us all closer together, well, then you're fostering a reality in which people are less likely to commit violent crimes because they feel a sense of common identity. Obviously, if someone's your friend, you wouldn't be likely to march into their country and gun them down. If someone's a stranger, sure. But if you start recognizing all strangers as potential friends, or at least distant relatives, then you might be a little reluctant to just go out there and shoot them in the name of whatever.
If you can demonize something.
Yes, environmental pressure is the story of the past 5,000 years, our cultural history coming out of various centers of civilization in the world. And in fact, as an anthropologist, I would say let's take it back to the end of the Ice Age, to about 10,000 BC, 11,000 BC, as we were having these massive, catastrophic melt-offs around the world, which inundated places like the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon and completely reshaped the landscape, and inundated places like the Persian Gulf, completely changing the landscape, that large populations of humans, some would say proto-humans, you want to talk about other ancestor species, that's fine, but bipeds, who are our ancestors, were displaced as a result of this. And so whenever we get pushed out of our comfort zone or our routine, it's a sink or swim kind of reality, and we're willing to experiment with whatever we can possibly experiment with, whatever is available. And certainly it would have included medicine plants, or plants which contain molecules which change the way we experience space and time and this immediate reality. So of course there was a lot of that being consumed. And in indigenous communities, these substances, these plants, are still revered as being very powerful medicines. In our religious traditions of the world, they have become the stuff of legends. I don't say myth, I say legend. But in some cases, perhaps they are myths and revolve around divine figures. In the case of the Soma, Soma is revered as a god and yet has the form of the physical form of a mushroom. So both a legend and a myth in this case. Or, as we were speaking before about the Judeo-Christian tradition and these medicine plants, which figure so prominently in that tradition, that all of these plants were something which people experimented with in times of famine or crisis, or in the process of trying to cure and heal individuals who were suffering from various maladies. I mean, we use many medicines nowadays quite routinely to address issues of physical, mental, psychological health, which are potentially much more dangerous than these naturally occurring substances, which many would claim achieve the same results. I know someone who used plant medicines as part of their curing their cancer, and that they realized in the process that there was an emotional component to their illness, and that emotional component could only be treated through the ingestion of these medicine plants.